Hello and welcome to NEA New Mexico's take on public school legislation, where we interview key legislators, true public school champions that are pushing the needle in favor of our public schools and students. I'm Steve Ciañez, Government Relations Director for NEA New Mexico. And today, joining us is New Mexico State Senator William Souls, representing Senate District 37, Doña Ana County. He has served as senator since 2013. Senator Souls is the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and he's also the chair of the Legislative Education Study Committee, an interim committee. Let me welcome and thank Senator Souls for joining us today in this brief but important conversation around public education. Senator Souls, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Steve. Thank you.
The Yazzie Martinez lawsuit ordered the state to provide a sufficient education to all students, especially at-risk, special ed, English learners, and Native American students. How did the 2020 legislative session get us closer to meeting this goal?
And that's really a good question, in that the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, in New Mexico, in our Constitution, it says that we shall provide a sufficient education for all students. And for years, we haven't done that. We have underfunded education year after year after year. And the students who are most affected by that are the ones who need the extra funding the most. And so the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, I don't fight that at all. I think it's a wonderful thing. The first several years I was in the legislature, I continued to push for substantial increases in education funding to meet our constitutional mandate. And the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit just kind of really said, no, you really need to do this. In particular, we know that students can get a great education in New Mexico, but they're handicapped and hindered by situations outside of the classroom. By being a second language learner makes everything harder, by having high mobility rates, by living in poverty. All of those things we know affect education outcomes and achievement. And the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit indicates that we need to put extra resources and money to meet those specific needs of the students. And I think this last year, where we had some discretion in how funding was going to be spent, we really tried to support those schools and those districts that have high need students and a large concentration of them, so that more of the education funding is going to flow to those districts and more specifically to those direct schools, and give them the resources to provide and make up for what those students aren't able to get in their families just because there's a lack of resources. If we truly believe that all students should get a high quality education, then we need to make sure we put the money and the resources in to give them the opportunity to do that, not to hold them up and say, oh, sorry, your situation at home isn't that good, so you don't get as much of a chance for the American dream as others. And we really need to believe that education is the great equalizer, and that means putting more resources to those kids who need it the most.
Let's go with the next question. HJR 1 was amended in the Senate to include funding for K-12 education. Per the final version of the bill, it included, and I quote, 40% of the additional distribution shall be for the public school permanent fund beneficiary for enhanced instruction for students at risk of failure, extending the school year, and public school teacher compensation. So help our listeners understand what was the driving force behind this amendment.
The HJR 1 is the tapping into the permanent fund initially for just early childhood education. And it's not a done deal. We still have a lot of work to do to get the public to support it when it's on the ballot. So there's lots more to happen before it becomes law and actually changes things. I think some of the concern was we sit on a huge permanent fund, and certainly we have big needs in early childhood education, but it's going to take a while to ramp up those programs to use all of that extra money that's going to spin off. And I think part of this was driven by the fact that if you dump too much money in all at once, then money's going to get wasted. Yet we know there are places within the K-12 education system we already have where the funding is not secure. It is year to year, it could come or go. And I think this was a real move to use the permanent fund to provide for more stability in at-risk funding for all students, and to make sure that those monies that we put in through the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit become more ingrained in the general funding rather than at the whims of how much money is available. I mean, I've often talked about that when we talk about a sufficient education or the needs of children for a sufficient education, it doesn't change based on whether there's a lot of money in the budget or not very much money in the budget. Sufficiency doesn't change based on how much money is available. This provides a more permanent stream and provides stability, I think, in the funding for those at-risk funds that, and again, tying back to the other question about the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, that there will continue to be adequate funds to meet the needs of our most vulnerable, our at-risk students.
Educators continue to leave the profession at alarming rates, and every year there are fewer and fewer college students going into education. Educators and parents want to know, what did legislators do in this last session to tackle those two issues?
There are a couple of things, and this is an area that's near and dear to me. For years, I was an academic advisor and faculty and staff at New Mexico State University in the College of Education, preparing teachers for our classrooms. And as you indicated, we know that we are not putting as many teachers into the classrooms now as we have in the past. We've got large attrition rates. The state, through the last administration, their means for solving that problem was to bring more of the alternative certifications, put people into the classroom and then get them the pedagogy afterwards. And I think that just causes our children more problems. We know that teachers need to know how to teach, how to work with children, as well as have to have the content in order to work with them. Over the last couple of sessions, and it continued with this one, we have had legislation that were named things like Grow Your Own, which for districts, when we've got teaching assistants, we've got other people already working at the school, they know they want to work with kids, is getting them into the colleges and universities that prepare teachers and providing funding for them. There were also a number of other scholarship programs specifically for people going into education. We've tried to beef up and support all of those. There also is lots of discussion that will be happening over the interim the next 2 years about revamping the College of Education programs so that they do a better job of preparing teachers for the classroom today. Most of our teacher preparation programs were designed to prepare teachers for the classroom of 2000. We're now 20 years past that. We know more about how children learn, about how to provide high quality education, and our teacher preparation programs need to reflect that and make sure that they are preparing teachers for today's classroom and the classrooms of tomorrow, not for the classrooms of 20 or 30 years ago, and what that all entails. And I think by making it more of a professional approach to education, that we certainly will attract more. Now, embedded in all of that is we need to pay teachers more. Education is the one profession that has the lowest average pay for the required median level of education. Most educators are required within a few years to be working on and get a master's degree in order to continue on, yet our pay is set up for the level of bachelor's degree only. And we also know in New Mexico, teachers can go down here in Las Cruces, they can go down to El Paso and start off at $5,000 to $10,000 more per year than we pay in New Mexico. And particularly our teachers in bilingual education and in special education are being poached by other states and other districts, mostly because of higher pay. And if we truly believe that education is the means to a better life, is the future of New Mexico, then we need to make sure we start paying our teachers competitive salaries to keep them here in New Mexico, and that we treat them like professionals that they are, so that they feel valued by the administration and by the state. I think those are the real keys. Within all of that, we also need to make sure that our current teaching professionals start building up our profession. I mean, there's an old saying that 90% of an organization's image comes from within. And if we as teachers are discouraging students from going into education, we're shooting ourselves and our profession in the foot. We need to start looking for those high value, high quality students when they're in junior high and high school, and keep planting in them the seed that you'd be a great teacher, you'd be a good science teacher, you'd be a good math or an English teacher, and start planting those seeds that they can make a real difference in the future by going into education.
Well, thank you, Senator Souls, for meeting with us today. NEA-New Mexico looks forward to working with you to make sure we deliver a quality public education to all students. We wish you the best. Stay safe.
Thank you. Being a teacher, education is who I am. So I appreciate the discussion.